appreciation of various linguistic translation and literature fields and subfields. I also would like to thank the audience who, as I see, coming from different Jordanian universities and Arab universities. As for Dr. Aseel, I have known her actually since we are graduate students at Newcastle University since 2013. She was a diligent and hardworking student who indeed inspired her tutors and close mates. And I'm so happy actually her supervisor is with us today. Thank you, Dr. Richard, for your presence actually. And since Dr. Aseel's graduation in 2017 and here joining the University of Jordan, she has established herself as a scholar in the fields of cognitive semantics and becomes among the leading scholars in the field worldwide. For me, I don't exaggerate actually mentioning that Dr. Aseel is among the best Arab linguists, thanks to her rigorous research that's appearing in top-tier journals in the world. She had just published a paper in Language and Cognition, which is a Cambridge University Press journals in collaboration with Dr. Abdurrahman Al-Takhani. Today, Dr. Aseel will talk about one important topic in the current agenda of the study of metaphors and metonymies as a communicative message that are deeply rooted in our cognition. So allow me to welcome Dr. Aseel. Dr. Aseel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Marwan Jarrah, for this lovely introduction. I have known Dr. Marwan, as he said, since we were students at Newcastle University, and he's also a distinguished researcher and syntactician. Thank you very much for your introduction. And I would like to thank Professor Jihad Hamdan, the president of Abitao, for inviting me to give this talk, and Dr. Dina Salman, of course, the organizer of this forum. So I will just share my screen with you now. Dr. Dina, I cannot share my screen. It's disabled.
Okay, just give me. Okay, can you now?
Yes. Right. Share. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'll just time myself so I don't exceed the time limit. Okay, so my talk today is on culture embodied embodied cognition or cultural embodiment, and I will be focusing on metaphor and metonymy. Since our audience, not all of our audience are linguists, so I thought I would give a brief overview of metaphor and conceptual metaphor theory, and then move on to embodiment. So we have two main views of metaphor. We have two main views of metaphor, which are the traditional or classical and the cognitive. And the main proponents of the traditional view of metaphor are Aristotle, Grice, Davidson, Richards, while the cognitive view, we have Lakoff and Johnson, Raymond Gibbs, Zoltan Kovixes, and of course, many others. Now, in the traditional view of metaphor, metaphor is just a figure of speech. It's a property of language, while in the cognitive view, metaphor is a property of concepts, and it plays a role in our understanding and reasoning about the world. Now, metaphor under the traditional view is metaphorical language because it's just a property of language. Is not motivated, and it may even be arbitrary. While in the cognitive view, it is psychologically viable and it has a psychological reality, as I will show in a minute. Now, under the traditional view, metaphors arise because of similarity, while in the cognitive view, metaphor is often not based on similarity, and again, we will see that in a minute. Under the traditional view, it is believed that only great poets and novelists can produce metaphors. So this is a quote by Aristotle. The greatest thing by far is to have command of metaphor. This alone cannot be imparted by another. It is the mark of genius. So it means that only great poets and novelists can produce metaphors like Shakespeare and others. While in the cognitive view of metaphor, we believe that it can be produced in everyday life by ordinary people not just by talented people. So under the traditional view, since only great poets and novelists can produce metaphor, we can live perfectly well without it, because it's just a luxury or a rhetorical device, or yes, a figure of speech. While in under the cognitive view, metaphor is part of our cognitive system and we cannot live without it. These ideas under the cognitive view of metaphor gave rise to the conceptual metaphor theory, which is referred to as CMT. And under this theory, metaphor is defined as understanding one conceptual domain in terms of another conceptual domain. This is by Lakoff and Johnson, and of course, in their work in 1980. This is the second edition of their book in 2003. Now, I'm going to discuss this classical theory, even though it has been criticized by many scholars, including Zoltan Kavixes, and actually recently he has suggested a refinement of this theory. He calls it extended conceptual metaphor theory, where he proposed that conceptual metaphors are based actually on 4 levels and highlighted the role of memory and the context. These 4 levels include the image schema, the domain, the frame, and the mental space. And I'm not gonna discuss this refinement today. I'm gonna focus on the original classical theory of metaphor. Now, so what does this mean that we understand one domain in terms of another? When we talk and when we think about, for example, life, we tend to do that in terms of a journey. When we talk, so we say things like, he has reached a dead end in his career. So we take terms or words from the domain of journey. When we talk about arguments, we tend to talk, and not just to talk, and to think about arguments in terms of war. So we borrow some words from the domain of war, like, for example, he attacked my argument. I lost to him. I won to him. And love in terms of a journey as well. So, for example, their relationship is going nowhere. Love in our culture, we have love is madness, and of course in other culture, but in our culture it has roots in Layla, Imru al-Qais, and Layla, Majnoon Layla. And then theories in terms of building. So we say things like his theory is weak, his theory has no foundation, it's shaky, it's strong, and so on and so forth. This is how we understand one domain in terms of another. So at the conceptual level, we have a conceptual metaphor where we have the source domain, which is typically, not all the time, concrete. And we have the target domain, which is typically abstract. So we have A is B, source is target, life is a journey. At the linguistic level, we have metaphorical expressions that reflect this conceptual schema. So we say things like, he's without a direction in life, I am where I want to be in life, I am at a crossroads in my life, and other expressions, which, as you can see, are used in everyday life. And this is what we mean by understanding. We establish a set of mappings between these 2 domains, mappings or correspondences. This is an example of, these are mappings between journey and love. Love is a journey. So the travelers are the lovers, the vehicle or the partners, the vehicle is the love relationship itself, the journey, the events in the relationship, the distance covered is the progress made, the obstacles encountered are the difficulties experienced, and so on and so forth. These are the mappings that we establish between the 2 conceptual domains. And also we have metonymy. Metonymy, the cognitive grounding of metonymy is different from metaphors and similes, of course. In metonymy, we have a conceptual source domain which provides a point of access to a target domain based on a relationship of contiguity or closeness of association. So, for example, the target is conceived of from the viewpoint of the source. So when we say Putin attacked Ukraine, here Putin stands as a metonymy for the Russian Air Force. But this attack is conceptualized as Putin's responsibility. That's why we use his name. An important a type of metonymy is what we refer to as synecdoche, and it's part for whole. We have a part that stands for the whole. Like, for example, we say we need a couple of strong arms for this team. Arms stand for the whole person. He asked for her hand in marriage. There are many good heads in this university. So here we use the part to stand for the whole. And of course, as you see, the part chosen is not random. So there are many good heads in this university because, you know, in the head, we have the brain, and it is responsible for the mental faculty. That's why we choose the head. And we don't say, and we do not choose another part. Now, our friends from the literature department must be wondering, so are you saying that, you know, ordinary people can produce metaphor just like novelists and poets? This is partially true. There is a widespread, I'm going to take just a small detour here and to talk about metaphor in literature. There is a widespread notion that the real source domains of metaphor are found in literature and other works of art, and the creative genius of the poet and the artist that creates the most authentic examples of metaphor. Yeah, this from the viewpoint of cognitive linguistics, yeah, this is only partially true. Because when works of art are analyzed, or novels or poems, we can find everyday conceptual system that contributes a great deal to this artistic genius. But of course, we cannot deny that poets and novelists have this innovative and original sense of metaphor. So I will give you an example, unexpected. I'll give you an example from Gabriel Garcia Marquez's novel, Love in the Time of Cholera. Once he tasted some chamomile tea and sent it back, saying only, "This stuff tastes of window." Both she and the servants were surprised because they have never heard of anyone who had drunk boiled window. But when they tried the tea in an effort to understand, they understood. It did taste of window. So this type of metaphor, it is creative and it is less clear because it's not based on similarity. There is no similarity between windows and teas. It's richer in meaning than everyday metaphors. And of course, the language used by poets and novelists is much more sophisticated. But the thing is, as creative and as original these metaphors may be, they are not that frequent. They are less frequent. And the majority of the metaphors found in novels and poems, they are actually based on ordinary conceptual schema, like life is a journey and death is the end of the journey. An example is the 19th century poet Christina Georgina Rossetti. She has a poem called "Does the Road Wind Uphill All the Way?" And of course, everyone who read this poem realizes that it's not just a journey to an end at the end of a road winding uphill. It is actually about life and death. So it is based on life is a journey, conceptual metaphor, and death is the end of the journey, conceptual metaphor. Okay, going back to our talk, embodiment. Now, embodiment is a difficult concept in cognitive science in general and in cognitive linguistics in particular. Why is it difficult? Because it can be thought of in various ways. Now, the embodiment is very important to the cognitive view of metaphor and to conceptual metaphor theory. The human body, which is a source domain, and you now know what a source domain is, plays a central role in the emergence of metaphorical meaning and metonymical, of course, meaning in English, Western languages, and other languages which are unrelated to English, like Arabic and others. Okay, so what do I mean by embodiment? Let's take the case of emotions. In emotions, we have the container schema. It's an image schema, and it plays a role in the conceptualization of emotions in, not just English, in Hungarian, Japanese, Spanish, Chinese, and other investigated languages. Emotions in these languages are conceptualized as substances inside the human body, and the human body is the container. Okay, so we produce metaphorical language, like I can see metaphorical expressions, like I can see sadness in her eyes. Eyes are the containers for the emotions. He is in love with her. Here, love is the container when you say he is in love with her, he's inside the container. And then we have another expression which is he fell out of love with her. So he's like out of the container. In Arabic, we say راسها معبى علي. Her head literally means her head is full of my ideas, and it's against of ideas against me. So the head here is a container, and this head is full of ideas. And these ideas, of course, it has negative connotation, that these ideas against me, and she will take an action which is not good towards me. This is what's meant by her head is full of ideas against me. So here the head is a container. Now, according to Gibbs, we have what is called embodied metaphorical imagination. He says that this embodiment is psychologically real. So speakers' use and understanding of the reason why different words and expressions mean what they do is motivated by embodiment, and they are aware of it. Embodiment is hypothesized to function automatically and interactively in speakers' online use, as well as understanding of linguistic meaning. So this means that it's psychologically real. And there are some psycholinguistic studies that aim to find the embodied character of metaphoric language use related to how people understand both conventional and idiomatic expressions. How? First step, we conduct cognitive linguistic analysis to discover possible patterns of embodied metaphors. And then, of course, we carry out investigations on people's understanding of these source domains, focusing on their embodied understanding apart from their use. And then finally, using the data from these analyses to make predictions about what gets mapped from the target domains in conceptual metaphors. So one of these psycholinguistic studies that examined people's intuitions of different bodily experience in Gibbs, they investigated idioms like blow your stack, flip your lid, explode, making my blood boil. And of course, these roughly mean to get very angry. These are based on the conceptual metaphor, anger is a heated fluid in a container. Now, the primary way that people acquire this source domain knowledge is through their own experiences of their bodies as containers. So through your understanding of your body and how you use this body in the physical world, you can acquire this conceptual metaphor, which is anger is a heated fluid in a container. Because their bodies are containers. This is how they perceive it. Their bodies are containers. And in these bodies, we have various fluids. So like sweat, blood, urine, and others. And these fluids, they can get heated up. They can be heated up when you are under pressure, during exercise, when you are feeling emotional in different ways, you feel as if your temperature is high. And this is how people understand these idiomatic expressions through their bodies and how they experience the physical world through their bodies. So when people understand anger idioms like blow your stack and others, they infer that the cause of anger is internal pressure. And the expression of anger is unintentional, and it happens in an abrupt manner and sometimes violent manner. Just like when you put a pot on the stove and it starts to boil, sometimes the lid flips up. It's the same thing with our bodies. When you feel angry, as if we are going to explode. Now, the same inferences are not drawn about causation, intentionality, and manner when comprehending literal paraphrases of these idioms, like to get very angry. It's not the same as hit the ceiling. Now, what about embodiment in metonymy? In metonymy of emotions, focusing on emotions today, such as anger and others, we have two main metonymies which were discussed by Lakoff and Kovixes. The physiological effect of the emotion stands for the emotion, and the behavioral reaction of the emotion stands for the emotion. And these physiological effects are real. So body heat stands for anger. When you say an expression like he's a hothead, it has been scientifically proven that when you are angry, your temperature rises. So body heat stands for anger. The physiological effect of the emotion stands for the emotion. Internal pressure stands for anger, like don't get a hernia. And again, it has been scientifically proven that when you feel really angry, your blood pressure rises. Redness in the face stands for anger. He got red with anger. In Arabic, we also have these expressions. Agitation stands for anger. You look upset. And the second metonymy, which is the behavioral reaction of the emotion, stands for the emotion. This is an example of it. Flight stands for fear. When you run, you run when you are scared. So he fled from prosecution. This is a behavioral reaction of anger. Now, many languages around the world share embodied experience of emotions and other abstract concepts. And of course, it's understandable because all of us have, human bodies and with basic similar functions. So you must be wondering, does this mean that the human body as a source domain is universal in all languages and cultures? And it is the same all over the world, since we are talking about the human body as a source domain? Well, no, it's not actually true. There are many, many similarities between languages, unrelated languages, because of this source domain, but we also have differences that arise from the culture. So work on embodiment, we have different works here, has suggested that embodiment can be actually grounded in culture and in personal experience. So conceptual metaphor is grounded in experiential basis arising from interaction between the body and cultural experience. And we have different types of bodily experience, but some of them can emerge from the cultural filter. So we have these metaphors that are shared between different languages and cultures, but when they pass through a cultural filter, this cultural filter includes a cultural experience in a certain speech community, and the interaction between that experience and your bodily experience. What emerges on the other side is what we call cultural metaphors, and these metaphors, which are based on embodiment, are grounded in culture. Okay, so cultural experience refers to the situation where individuals who live in a certain physical environment experience the culture linked to it simultaneously. So are there examples that show this cultural embodiment? Yes, we have many, many examples that shows the effect of culture on embodiment. For example, in Spanish, we have the metaphor, the effect of anger on the person is swelling. And this is like a sub-metaphor of the main metaphor, anger is a hot fluid in a container. So when anger increases and the container is conceptualized as closed, the fluid produces pressure on the walls of the container. And we can have two effects on the container. It will explode or burst, as in English, he had a burst of anger. Or in Spanish, which is specific to Spanish, the pressure can deform the container, making it swell. So this is an example from Spanish, which literally translates as, your silly behavior bursts me, it makes me furious. And then we have this example, which is, this example is about the anger is a hot fluid in a container, and this example shows the swelling part. Me estás hinchando, which means you are swelling me, you are annoying me, and this is colloquial. And again, another difference between English and Spanish. In English, the whole body gets swollen, but in Spanish, you have the whole body and the nose, and of course other parts. The nose, it's the nose. This is very specific to Spanish. So we have an example. Me estás hinchando las narcias. I'm sorry, I don't speak Spanish, but basically you are swelling my nose, which means that you are annoying me. Okay, so this is specific to Spanish. and it has to do with the Spanish language. We have blood as an internal bodily substance, and it is used as a source domain. This is another example. In English, Hungarian, and Arabic. And there are many similarities between English, Hungarian, and Arabic. But we have differences between, we have examples that are only found in Arabic. Like, for example, مأبرد دمه, it means his blood is very cold. And this is used to conceptualize an irritating character. This doesn't exist in English. In English, we say, for example, he murdered him in cold blood, which also exists in Arabic, but the coldness of blood is not related to an annoying character in English. بلعب بدمه, he's playing with his blood. It means that when one is playing with his blood, he is putting his life in danger. And this doesn't exist in English, as far as I know, of course, based on the research that I have read. ما عنده دم, he has no blood. It means that he has no emotions. If you have no blood, then you have no emotions. These are the differences I found. Another example from Arabic, we have an expression which is used in Jordanian Arabic, and it's very colloquial and vulgar. The way to express extreme anger is to say that مدبوك على صباحه, which means someone stomped repeatedly on your forehead, and that's why you look really, really angry. And this is actually, you can find a basis for this in the Jordanian culture, because we have an exaggeration in Jordan. So you say something like استنيته 1000 ساعة, I waited for him for 1000 hours, or أكلت كل المطبخ, I ate all the kitchen. And of course, this exists in other culture, but in our culture it's very salient. And this is the same way here. Anger is conceptualized as someone who's been stomped on his face repeatedly, not just once, again and again and again and again. Okay, another example from Jordanian Arabic about fear. Now, we said that there is a metonymy, which is the physiological effect for the emotion, stands for the emotion. In Jordanian Arabic, we have the metaphorical effect of the emotion, stands for the emotion. It's not real, the effect is not real. It's just based on cultural beliefs about what happens to certain body parts as a result of the emotion. So we have expressions like قطع خلفي, means that because I stopped being fertile because of anger. I was so scared, I became infertile. Now, of course, this is not proven scientifically. These are just cultural beliefs in Jordan that when a woman feels scared or a man feels scared, this has a metaphorical effect on their reproductive system. It's part of the culture. Now, do we have cultural embodiment in metonymy? Yes, we do. So we said in a type of a metonymy, part for whole, the part stands for the whole. Body parts are capitalized upon to conceptualize various abstract concepts, but research has shown that certain body parts are salient in certain cultures, but not in others. For example, in Japanese, the part which, let's say, shows the anger in Japanese is the belly, hara. So hara as a body part is used in Japanese to conceptualize anger. In English, the heart and the stomach are the main parts employed metonymically to express fear in English. So my heart skipped a beat. The stomach, it has to do with experiencing nausea and other symptoms. In Jordanian Arabic, it is the heart and the legs. So when you say something like وقع قلبي, my heart fell because of anger, fear. ساب ركبي, my knees became weak, مثلا because of fear. وقعت عطولي, legs again. I fell on the ground because of fear. So the legs are more salient in Jordanian Arabic than the stomach, which is more salient in English. In English and other languages, feelings originate from the heart, the same with Arabic. But so we have expressions like his heart is broken, soft-hearted, I have a heavy heart. In Malay, for example, the liver is the originator of feelings, not the heart. So they say patah hati, broken liver, my liver is broken. Berat hati, heavy liver, not the heart, the liver. Another example from metonymy, the eyes. Now, in English and many other languages, the eyes are the window to the soul. So they reveal your emotions. So in English, we have the light of the eyes as metonymic indicator of happiness. So we have verbs like gleam, glint, shine, sparkle, and they are all used to describe a happy person. In Chinese, the eyebrows are the metonymic indicator of happiness, not the eyes, the eyebrows. So the eyebrows are more salient than the eyes when it comes to the expression of happiness in Chinese. The interesting thing is that this cultural filter can also work between subcultures, like sub-Arab cultures. مثلا, Indonesian Arabic, the head Indonesian Arabic is used to conceptualize the character trait stubbornness. In JA, it's not just used to conceptualize the stubbornness, it's also used to conceptualize other character traits like arrogance, raso kbir, ma akbar raso, his head is big, it means that he's a show-off. Gullibility, راسها معبى علي, when you fill the head of others with your own ideas, then this person is naive. You can just tell him anything and then he will act on it. So this would describe him as being gullible. Eccentricity, راسه مربع, his head he has a square head. Here I don't know, the shape of the head, which is unusual, square, it is used to conceptualize eccentric ideas, to have very strange ideas. And these ideas, because of their eccentricity, they may be even be perceived as stupid, could be stupid. يعني راسه مربع, his head is square, he's a stupid person. So even between the cultural filter through which different types of bodily experience pass to participate in metaphor mappings can also function between subcultures, not only between cultures. So in conclusion, I can say that differences in embodied metaphoric conceptualizations between cultures and within subcultures can arise due to variation in experiential focus, since speakers who live in different geographical and social contexts could be attuned to different aspects of their bodily experience. Hence, this could result in partial motivation of differences in the ways they express themselves metaphorically or metonymically or both. So we do have the same bodies, but the way we experience the world is different based on our environment and our culture. Thank you for listening. 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Naam, thank you, Dr. Aseel, so much for this nice. Just 1 minute, please.
Dr. Aseel,
Yeah.
would you like me to remove your to stop sharing?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Aseel, again for this nice talk, which you where you provided a very nice and actually convincing argument about the effect of culture on the metaphors and their relations actually, and how they interact in communication. Now I've opened the floor to any colleagues who want to ask Dr. Aseel a question about her talk, and you are all welcome. You can just press the hand on button so we can know that you are. If you allow me, we can start with Dr. Richard. Dr. Richard, if you want to say something about your student, Dr. Aseel.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Aseel. It was very, very nice to That's very good to listen to your talk. I was wondering whether there are any differences in metaphor metonymy for these mappings, so that one is more conducive than the other, or one is more restricted than the other for these cultural mappings.
Is your question about metaphor and metonymy?
Yes, whether say metaphor is more restricted than metonymy or vice versa.
Well, based on my research and other papers I have read, I can find more diversity in metaphor. In metonymy, because the parts used are just, the same parts. So the differences between cultures have to do with the part they chose to conceptualize a certain abstract concept. It could be the heart, could be the liver, could be, but in metaphor, you can find many metaphors where they exhibit cultural differences. So I would say it's more restrictive in metonymy than in metaphor.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Richard. Any colleague who wants to ask Dr. Aseel a question about her talk or anything relevant to her actually interest and the relationship between cognition and metaphor. Professor Jihad Hamdan, floor is yours, Dr. Jihad.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jarrah. And I'd like also to thank Dr. Aseel Zibin for this very interesting presentation on metaphor and metonymy. In fact, I want to use also this metaphor that has to do with blood, because I couldn't link at the beginning because the internet was دمه ثقيل also this evening. So I couldn't really, I couldn't start with you. I had to struggle with the internet in order to connect. So it was دمه ثقيل. And I think what is important in light of what Dr. Zibin said is that it sometimes depends on how we read the metaphor, how we read the context, so that we can look for sometimes for universalities and sometimes we can look for culture-specific metaphors. And I would like really to encourage Aseel to think also along the same lines that Chomsky and others have really suggested. Why don't we also adapt our terminology? So we talk about universal metaphors and periphery metaphors. And periphery has to do with culture-specific metaphors. And universal, it's universal. It's across cultures. And if we go into this, then we may develop a theory also, that is, we are also born with this universal base for metaphors, because after all, it's language, it's part of language. So then we may also think of, anyway, re-examining our terminology. And sometimes just, it's how we read it. For instance, راس مربع. And for me, راس مربع is not stupid. راس مربع is someone لا بأخذ ولا بعطي. He is stubborn, he has rigid ideas, rigid mentality, he is not flexible, and that's why it's مربع. مربع is square because, it's because of these angles. They are square. So his head is just like this, his mind, his brains, etc. And probably one thing is, you may wish also to think of it, sometimes we need to go beyond the surface. For instance, قطع خلفه, قطع خلفه. And you said there is no probably scientific base for الخوف قطع خلفه, that is no longer productive or reproductive. But I think there is some scientific base, because if someone is panicking, is scared, he will not be in the mood of making love. So in this sense, if this goes on, then there will be no reproductivity. So sometimes it depends really how we look at things. But anyway, I would like Dr. Zibin is a specialist in this field. We really wish to see more and more coming out of her research, and finding a way to put it in line with other aspects of language acquisition and its own terminology. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Zibin, for this very informative presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jihad, for your questions. Yes, actually, we have in my paper on blood, I discussed دمه خفيف. He has light blood, which means he has a sense of humor, and دمه تقيل, he has heavy blood and he's like an intolerable person. And it has to do with the blood texture. So the blood, if it's conceived of as heavy, as in clotty and thick, then it is used to conceptualize an intolerable character. While when, because, you know, clotty and thick substances are difficult to swallow. So maybe the same logic is used to produce the conceptual metaphor. Having an intolerable character is having heavy blood. So يعني الشخص ما عم ينبلع معك الفكرة, يعني you cannot swallow his ideas, you cannot swallow what he's saying. The same thing when you cannot swallow heavy substances, maybe the same logic. As for Chomsky, well, the school of cognitive linguistics is, of course, different from generative linguistics, and we have many differences. But yeah, I can see your point, the idea of universality versus specificity, if you want to say. So language universals and periphery. Yeah, there are some similarities, but the differences between the cognitive school and the generative school. In the generative school, Chomsky argues that we are born with a LAD, with the language acquisition device, or universal grammar, and it's specific to humans. But based on our school of thought, we are not born with anything, actually. We're just born as a blank slate, and we acquire everything based on our experience in the world. And there is, we cannot be born with a metaphorical, let's say, device, because there are so many people who do not understand metaphor, including, for example, autistic children. They do not understand metaphor at all. They just understand everything literally. So it's maybe we are not born with it. I have actually cannot say, because it needs a lot of research. And about قطع خلفه, the idea is, this is actually one of the refinements of conceptual metaphor theory, is how we understand metaphor in the online use of metaphor. In the old theory, it's vague, understanding one term or one domain in terms of another. Based on the new refinement of the theory, there are actually 4 domains. We have the image schema, we have the domain, the frame, and the mental space. And the first 3 are stored in long-term memory, while in the mental space is happens actually in working memory. So in the mental space, we work out what does this metaphor actually mean. So based on the interpretations we had in the paper on fear, in قطع خلفه, it means that because of this incident, that caused him great fear, he will not reproduce after that. This is what we got. So maybe others would have said something different. We don't know. Okay. And the last question, رأس مربع, actually, it wasn't my own interpretation. I posted the question on Facebook and I tried to get as many interpretations as possible. And the one that stuck out or was highlighted is that having a very strange shape of the head, which is very different from the circular shape or the oval shape, it means that this person has really strange ideas, just like the shape of his head. These strange ideas could be perceived as stupid by others. He's just not an ordinary person. So that's why I said it could be used to conceptualize the eccentricity. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Aseel, for your answers to Dr. Hamdan's questions. Also, if we have any question from any other colleague, he or she is welcome.
I do not, hello everybody, assalamu alaikum, and Susanna. I don't know how to raise my hand. I'm looking for a hand to raise my hand, and I can't see the icon. So I'm sorry to just start talking.
You're welcome, you're welcome. Yeah, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Aseel, for this well-researched presentation. I actually enjoyed very much listening to it. It's obvious that you have read massively on the topic. And I would like to comment on a point, if I may, which, you know, basically while you were discussing or presenting, it just I remembered something, and that is that the more recent metaphor theory tries to look at various ways to bridge the divide between discourse and cognition-oriented approaches, or maybe the cognitive science and the social science perspectives. So the divide between the discourse and cognition-oriented approach is most probably going to linger further in this field, despite you know, this. There are attempts to unite the field through interdisciplinary approaches. For example, there's a researcher whose name is Hampe, published a paper in 2017, who tried to take multiple perspectives into considering a multidisciplinary or methodological approach to trying to bridge the divide between you know, the cognitive metaphors and other metaphors. So yes, so I find actually, you know, your examples very interesting, you know, in Arabic, and I enjoyed actually listening to the examples you have actually given. I would encourage you to do more of this, and maybe as Dr. Hamdan, you know, since, you know, researchers are trying to sometimes, you know, approach metaphors interdisciplinarily, or from, you know, with the use of different approaches or different methods. I would encourage you maybe to take these metaphors. I mean, there are an abundance of metaphors we use in colloquial, you know, Arabic, whether in Jordan or Syria or Lebanon or Palestine, you know, in the Fertile Crescent area, and maybe approach these from multiple, you know, perspectives, in order to get down and dig further into the meaning of these metaphors, and from where possibly such a metaphor, you know, originated. Because even in English, you know, I did some research on cognitive metaphors. I found that, you know, some metaphors go back to the Middle Ages, go back to the 16th century and 17th century, where they actually originate, and it may, you know, the origins may be culturally based or politically based or whatever. Okay. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Suzanne, for your comment. And yes, actually, I would love to track the origin of metaphors. But as you know, we do not have a corpus like the OED, where we can track language from decades or centuries ago. We don't have this, so we cannot possibly do any diachronic studies. I would love to do it. Yeah.
It's sometimes, to track a metaphor, sometimes is by checking when it appeared the first time. I mean, we don't need to have an OED, the Old English Dictionary, but it's like maybe tracking where possibly the metaphor appeared for the first time. And sometimes we don't need to go back too far. We could limit ourselves, for example, to the past 100 years or maybe the 20th century. A lot of metaphors, appeared more recently. So that would be, great to have research like this, especially when you are very much into this field.
Yeah,
and thank you so much, Dr. Aseel, for this enlightening and very interesting presentation.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you very much. Yes, that would be very interesting. And actually, investigating metaphors in the surrounding Arab countries, as you can see, there are, even though Tunisia and Jordan both are Arab countries, they share the same language, same religion, but there are so many differences between them, even in the way they conceptualize the body part, head. Just one body part, and there are so many differences between them. This is actually really interesting. This is the first time I do a research of this kind, and it's under review actually with Dr. Abdurrahman and Mrs. Ula Mismar, and hopefully we can get really good feedback on it, and maybe I can do future research about different sub-Arab cultures and see the different areas of variation between them, and of course similarities.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Aseel.
You're welcome. And in this course, when you mentioned discourse, investigation of different types of discourse, political discourse, medical discourse, there are so many metaphors used in these types of discourse, economic discourse, discourses, metaphors everywhere, and it is used as a persuasive device. It could be used for facilitating understanding of difficult economic concepts and other medical concepts. Yeah, so even in different types of discourses, you can find metaphors there. I don't know about metonymy. Metonymy is there in economy, but the study on metonymy is not that say concentrated as that on metaphor, which is actually really unfortunate, because metonymy is very interesting.
Yes, I mean, I did some research. I have a published research in 2020 about some metaphors in political discourse. So I collaborated with two other professors on this research, and it was quite interesting to look at some conceptual metaphors there in political discourse. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Suzanne, so much. Thank you, Dr. Aseel, again. Anybody from our audience, any colleagues, wants to ask Dr. Aseel a question? Dr. Aseel, if you allow me, I can ask you a question if you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
I understand, if I understand correctly, you talk about metaphors as a universal phenomenon, whereas embodiment is not. You said that metaphors are there in all languages, but embodiment is not.
No, embodiment is there in,
Okay.
at least in the investigated languages. We don't know about all languages. The investigated languages, including English, Hungarian, Spanish, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, Malay. The embodiment is there in all of these languages, and these languages share so many embodied experience, metaphors based on embodied experience, like, for example, anger. Anger is a hot fluid in a container. It exists in all of these languages. But my idea is that it's not all universal. You can find cultural variation, even in embodiment.
Okay, so you mean that embodiment is more or less cultural, not universal?
We cannot say one or the other. It is near universal because there are so many metaphors shared between these languages, but embodiment can be grounded in culture. You can find embodied metaphors that exist in certain cultures, but not in others. But these metaphors that you can find in different cultures, they are based on universal shared metaphors.
So why
there's
does
some variation.
Yes,
Yeah.
Dr. Aseel, why does universality matter in this case? And why did you bring the issue here?
The issue of universality, because based on our view of metaphor is part of our cognitive system, regardless of our languages and regardless of our cultures. So
you agree with Chomsky in this case? You do agree with Chomsky in this case?
Yeah, there are universal metaphors that exist between cultures, yes. But what I don't agree with Chomsky, the idea of it being innate. We don't know whether
it's universal. How can, Dr. Aseel, how can we account for its universality if we don't assume that it's innate, okay? We need a mechanism by which we can link universality with the idea that it's there in all languages. And the idea of Chomsky that it's innate actually provides us with direct account for its universality. It's not the case of culture, it's not the case of region, it's more or less relating to our cognition.
Yeah, and it could be related to our experience in the physical world because we have the same bodies. That we cannot tell whether we are born with something or not. This cannot be, say, confirmed. We don't know. So based on our experience, because we have similar, relatively similar bodies, similar bodily functions, the way we experience the physical world is very similar, of course. So we have these universals, but you might say there are different cultures and different environments. So there has to be some variation. Yes, there is variation based on geographical factors, based on certain social factors. These universal metaphors or image schemas, that like the containment schema is universal, but the way the container is perceived is different. In Spanish, it swells. In English, it explodes.
Actually, yeah, this is similar to Chomsky's idea. This is why we have principles and parameters, principles to account for why we have universals and parameters, why we have this variation and typological variation among languages. And I'm sure Dr. Richard and Dr. Yani, all our colleagues share this idea. Okay, thank you, Dr. Aseel, so much for this nice talk. I think we have no other questions. Thank you again for this nice talk, and your efforts as really as scholars in the field of cognitive semantics are highly appreciated, and they are all present actually. Thank you so much, Dr. Aseel, and I would like to also thank your lovely supervisor, Dr. Richard. I know him when I was a student at the Newcastle University, and would like also to thank all of our colleagues, Professor Jihad Hamdan, that I see their icons actually. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for
Dr. Adina?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Aseel.
Yes, I'd just like to thank all the attendees here, and I hope that you found my presentation both interesting and informative, and hopefully I will see you in other talks. Thank you, Professor Richard, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you everyone for well, first I'd like to thank Dr. Aseel for her insightful talk, and I'd like to thank Dr. Marwan for moderating so wonderfully. Our next session will be March 4th, and we are currently preparing our session. and invitations will be sent out hopefully next week. This talk will soon be available on our YouTube page. For those interested, they can watch it on our YouTube page. And once again, I would like to thank Dr. Aseel and Dr. Marwan, and I'd also like to thank our audience today. Dr. Jihad, would you like to?
Thank you very much
sign off?
indeed, Dr. Dina, for giving me a chance while we are closing this session. And I just want again to thank Dr. Aseel for this very motivating, really, presentation and encouraging us to think more and more about metaphors. And I still believe that the idea of universality and being universal or periphery is applicable here, because after all, the idea of innateness and thinking of universal grammar and core and periphery, it's for language, and metaphor is part and parcel of language. And I think the idea that innateness is not there, you know, this idea was discussed and has been examined carefully, and it's really difficult to think that we are not born with something innate. Since you've talked about similarities, and you mentioned so many similarities, and the most important similarity, I think, is that we have this innateness as human beings. But anyway, it's that probably we can go on discussing this issue in another venue. And part of this similarity and being or having things in common, I'm very pleased to learn that Richard supervised Aseel, and there's something in common between Richard and I. We are both supervisors. I supervised her MA, and you supervised her PhD. So this is all similarity is always there. Something in common is always there. Also would like to thank Dr. Jarrah for moderating this session, and would like to thank each and everyone who has been with us and who has contributed to making this seminar presentation a success. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Dr. Dina Salman again, and you can really close the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
And we
you.
hope to see you again next month.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hamdan.